Hello, everyone. Thank y'all for tuning in to another episode of the Failed Podcast. I believe I have something good for y'all today. We're going to explore the life of a very interesting individual that just by happenstance, I met her. I overheard her having a meeting across the way where my studio is. And, sometimes you just got to make the pitch. And here we are, and thank you so much for accepting the invitation on the Failed Podcast. I know you got a big event coming up. I'm going to read this, and then after that, I'll introduce you because I want to make sure I do a good job. Here we go. Join Hey Chica Movement 2024 Latina Leadership Summit, a powerful movement for Latinas ready to ignite their passion and goals with ganas. Connect with leaders, advocates, and influencers. Engage in thought-provoking panel discussions and build lifelong friendships. Engaging conversations about influencer marketing, community leaders, brand building, and collaborations. Don't miss this amazing opportunity to grow your network and be inspired. And so I will put the rest of that information, I'll put a link in the description below. And with that, I want to welcome Veronica. How are you doing today? Thank you for stopping by.
Yes, thank you for having me. I should say Chico, right? And true brand.
Absolutely.
And true brand presence. When I met you last week, I thought that was awesome, and how I feel like energy follows thought,
Yeah.
and I think it's amazing. I'm happy to be here. I'm excited to sit with you and talk a little bit about what we're doing with Hey Chica.
Yeah, I know you got an event coming up. It's in March. It's actually March 2nd of this year, and it's going to be in Dallas. How are you looking forward to it? Is it exciting? There's a lot of moving parts that you're still trying to put together to make that thing happen?
Yeah, putting on any type of event of that magnitude takes a lot of manpower and mind power. So we're in the finishing stretches. So we literally have maybe a month to go, and we've got so many women that want to engage from a speaker level, corporate partners that want to sponsor, and people that want to volunteer and get involved. So that's more of the overwhelming side. But other than that, we've got the content in place, we've got the venue, we got the food, and everything else is just a plus.
Well, it's great, the Hey Chica movement. For me, my wife is Latina, my daughter's a little Latina, and I see great leaders and great potential in both of them. But me and my wife are investing in our little Latina because she's entering a new world. Things are a little bit different than the way we did it. And so I'm just hoping that I can give her, like what I learned, that I can give it to her, and it benefits her as a community leader, as a communicator, and it makes her confident, not only as an individual, but like culturally speaking. I want her to be proud of her being a Latina. And before we jump into the questions that I have for you, it's funny, as Latinas, tell me if this is true or not. This is for, this might help my daughter in the future. Latinas have a lot of energy. Okay, I think of a plate that's bland, and then you add a little bit of salsa, right? And then when you add that salsa, it gives it a bit of kick. It makes it a little bit stronger, makes it a little bit better. Have you always had that salsa? Have you always had the energy? Because to do what you're doing, you cannot be bland.
Right. Because I was very lucky enough to be raised by my parents and my grandparents, like most Latinos, right? For me, Mexicana, most Mexicans, it's a tribe.
Yeah.
And so for me, I got the best of both worlds, which is rare because all of my cousins were only raised around my grandparents, who were very Mexican immigrant, very stick to the village, and my dad and my mom were very living la vida loca in the street, introduced black culture because we lived in the projects, so we got to see break dancing when it came out. And so I used to go live with my parents and then bring that culture back home to my grandparents' house. And so I was like the fast one in the street because I knew about Michael Jackson or whatever. So for me, it was an amazing blessing that my dad and my mom were living their life the way they were living, although everyone could say it was a rough life, right? It was in the street, and my dad was involved in drugs and everything else. But I got to experience life with a different lens. And I think that is what makes Latinos so diverse, right? Because the influence from the Black culture, Afro Latino, like the Spanish culture, like we are a mezcla no matter what. So
I agree.
That is what I was not until my adult life understood what that meant and knew where it came from when I went back and visited where I'm from.
And so, okay, here we go. So and obviously you being in two cultures, understanding, growing with music and all of this energy around you now, we see it very mature now. But when we were young, a lot of it was barely coming to be. Like people in society didn't know how to take it. And it was a lot harder back then. It was almost frowned upon, the stuff that we were into. And now it's like, oh, it's so cool. It's trendy. It's retro. But times have changed so much. But is there a vivid childhood memory that you had that had a significant impact on you and how you're shaped today? And I'm obviously with your grandparents, your parents, and the culture you grew in. But is there something significant that stands out that you're like, man, that really marked me and I'm glad I went through it?
Thank you for that question, because I teach that. I had to go back and write my timeline and where my pain had brought privilege and where my privilege had brought purpose. And I went back because I was dealing with, like all of us, all the trauma that we were enduring when we were younger, and knowing that if I wanted to stand in my truth and inspire Latinas and be true to who I was, I had to understand where I came from, so I wasn't showing up with a lot of this insecurity and trauma.
Yeah.
So when I went back, and I'm going to pull about 3 points, I'm hoping we have time to talk about it because it's so important. I go back and I'm like, oh my God, I've endured a lot, just like a lot of people, but death for me was very early on and prominent. I experienced death early. Even it started when I was 6 years old, and we had a shootout at my house, and it was me and my brother with my dad.
Yeah.
And just a shootout. So that was the first time that I experienced fear in the most craziest way, right? Like, and then also how I survived that. So I was like, oh my God, I had to understand what that meant, that sometimes you feel alone, that that at any moment life can be taken away. So I learned that then. And then when I was 14, I got pregnant, and I had a kid at 15. So that taught me my adolescence was no longer part of who I was, and I learned responsibility. And then that's when you kind of find out, like, oh my God, I'm responsible. I'm here alone. I didn't have a lot of the resources that I had. And then my dad died of a drug overdose when I was 21. So for a girl, a Latina, to lose her daddy and, all of that experience, and then everything else, like I was the first to graduate high school, the first to go to college. And then I lost my son just recently too. So like, all these things that you go through early on, Tia's dying or death, it just became part of my life. But it was also the purpose of how I started Hey Chica. So when I go look at it, I'm like, oh my God, I went to 13 elementary schools and we were evicted. And so I had to make friends everywhere I went. But now that's how I move in my business.
Yeah.
I'm nimble, I'm resilient. So those are things that people could say, oh my God, that's a lot of, trauma and tragedy. And I'm just like, but it's triumph for me because it makes me who I am now. I walk into a room with confidence because I know who I am and where I come from.
I love it. I mean, it's sad, but I love what it's become.
Yeah.
And with all of that death, I know I've seen some of the mentorships that you've done with younger Latinas and from high school and all ages. But I've heard a few interviews that you've done. And in essence, you're giving life to these individuals because they're tapping into this confidence, right? That's maybe not living, maybe that is a bit dying in some of us. And so it's almost a great contrast that sadly you went through a lot of death experiences, but now you're offering yourself a lot of life experiences over and over by inspiring so many people. But when we're young, we obviously go through things that we don't have control of. And you shared a few of those right now, but we also are fortunate to have people in our life that believe in us. And I feel like we have some similar, like we grew up in some similar neighborhoods, and it's very hard because people look down on us, whether it be because how much money we have, or maybe because of how we talk, or because of what our parents do for a living. but I still managed to find a few people that poured into me. What are some of the mentors or some of the lessons that a teacher or someone gave to you that you just like, man, you quote them whenever you talk or you present, that still stick with you till today?
Oh yeah, I love that. Yeah, so many good questions. I love this. Well, I go back to my dad, right? Like a very long time I was so angry, like, why did you live that life? Because I lost you and it kind of taken on. But my dad always made me feel like I was the princess and I was the reina. And like, even I remember he would be, playing poker with his friends and they would have Coke in the, and heroin in the bathroom. And I'd see the spoon and the needles and the vows and all that stuff. But I would still come in and he would let me sit on his lap and I would put his hat on. And he's like, yeah, baby, you're the girl. Like, you're going to break a lot of hearts. And it wasn't like, it was the way that I see a father pouring into his daughter, like you mentioned yours. And so I never felt like I wasn't the girl. My dad made me feel very admired and loved in that sense. So, but I got to see the dark part of life where, your nails get dirty. And that was just him being a human and trying to deal with his own thing. I didn't know what he was going through. So I got the love and the confidence from my dad at that point. And then my grandparents taught me about respect and like, make sure you do well, make sure you portarse bien, like make sure you greet whoever, make sure you don't forget who you come from, remember that we raised you well, and remember you're a hard worker. And and my grandmother taught us how to cook, because I still value that, me serving my husband or serving my community and going to church. And so all of that, those were my mentors early on, right? Not knowing now, like, I think, wow, like my ancestry and where I come from is the values is amazing. Yeah. And then after that, my grandmother was so proud because I was the only one who went to college. So she'd send me money or buy me my first suit and do all these things. But then it became my teachers, because I reached a level past what my family had kind of shot their arrow at, right? Yeah. So then when I started going to high school, my mom dropped out of 6th grade. So a lot of them didn't understand education was about hard work and labor. And so when I got to school, it was a teacher, and she's my first teacher. I still speak to her to this day. And she's like, you need to go to college because you have a kid. And she inspired me to do that. And so along the way, and then after I graduated college, I had a mentor. And the first job I had, they said, you need to buy a house. And I didn't know what that was, and a 401k. And so I bought my first house when I was 26 in Frisco, and I had it built. And I didn't know all that. It was just my people that were along the way, like, you need to do this, you need to do this. And even in the community in Dallas, like the Hispanic community, like, you need to get on a board. I didn't know what that meant. And they put me on the board, and I was like in the Hispanic Chamber board at 27 and 26 and 28. And I'm like, wow, that seems so young. But back then, it were people that saw my potential, and the people that really walked the walk and say they were turning around and building a pipeline or pouring in. And those people I'll never, ever forget. And I still make sure that I acknowledge them and that I give back to them and engage them in what I'm doing even now.
Being exposed to things is very important, and a lot of Latinos don't. They, like you said, they only get exposed to wherever their parents, wherever they reach in their community, their circle, and that's it. And it's hard to step out of it at times, but you have this confidence about you so early in life, obviously in high school, and beginning to have those conversations that you're going to go to college. And usually it's like, you got to go to work. You got to work. What's needed in your home. How scary was that? And someone watching who's in that same position, what are some things that kind of helped you take that leap? And start college, and then from there navigate all the difficulties of every semester and every year and finances and all of that. But what got you over that hump to something that's so common in the Latino culture is not to go to college, it's to go to work?
It's hard because my baby daddy at the time, his parents were like, stay here, get a job at the city. Like, why are you leaving us, right? Because not only did I go to college in a different state, I left Austin, I left Texas. I had a baby, right? So I didn't have a job, and I went to school in South Carolina, and all I had was my car. And I I just was like, even the day before I left to school, my dad had tried to kill himself in a drug overdose. So they called me, and he was handcuffed to the bed the night before I was going to drive off.
Wow.
And he's like, "You're leaving me. I can't believe you're abandoning me." And I know now it was just, people are like so attached and afraid, and we put that burden on our children because we make it as we're hurt people. You hear that all the time. And like, my parents were just so used to being abandoned in life, abandoned by the system around racism and integration and all these things. And they project that out onto their children, not knowing, and then the responsibilities on the children. So the guilt my dad had put on me, like, "You're leaving me. Everyone's like, you're leaving us." And I had to say, you know what, I'm leaving myself too, but I have to, because I have a kid. I had a brand new baby, and I had to, power through that. And I don't know what it was. And I really feel like it was a God thing that I finally surrendered to and said, "Lead me the way, and I got to do this, and I'm willing to take the risk to fail and come back." And I didn't, my college was $30,000 a year. I went to a private school that was in hospital. And so my teacher's like, "Get a loan out." And for someone to say, get a $30,000 loan out at 18, and you're talking to a Hispanic, a Chicana raised, and, Mexicana raised, like, it had to be a God thing, because I knew my purpose. I needed to succeed. I needed to excel, because I wanted also that everyone saw my dad as this black sheep and this drug addict and whatever. I wanted them to see that even though my father lived this life, he had an amazing daughter that represented him through the mud.
As Latinos, we have an immigration story. A lot of us do, and a lot of our parents start at zero. And we don't really get to experience that starting at zero, because we have the advantages of being over here in America. But I hear what you're saying. You leaving in a car, you have a kid, you don't know what you're going to do. You just know, I'm going to this university. In essence, you started at zero. And I know it's not an exact comparison, but when you think of the Latino stories of people who are in their 50s and 60s and how they started and made something of themselves, how do you equate starting at zero at that moment, and what were some of the takeaways, now looking back at that?
Yeah, starting at zero would have been an honor. It was starting behind the line, right? So
better said.
You know what I'm saying? Like, starting at zero is equal opportunity, I think, for me. But when your dad's over here threatening to kill himself, and you have, I maybe had $1,000 from my dollar dance at my wedding in my pocket, and I didn't have no place to stay. I got a hotel room when I got there, and then I'm in South Carolina where I have no family, and it was predominantly white, and it was like, they didn't even know what I was. They didn't know what a Mexican looked like when I got there. So imagine the culture shock. And I look at, when I see the immigration thing going on now on the border, these people are doing the same thing. They're crossing the border with maybe $10 in their pocket or that, with a child. So I see myself in this transition of people coming here, and the fear, but also the hunger and the appetite to want more. So it's beautiful to watch that you can still have a lot of fear, but your poder and your inspiration and your faith is like so grand that it drives you to the surrender to that. That's what people are trying to buy. That's what is the magic. So
you say hunger, and then but what comes to my mind is like, okay, it's either hunger or is I'm going to show you. Okay, either one can be a negative or positive. That's not what I'm trying to get at. But what was it for you? Was it, I'm going to show you world, I'm going to show you parents? Or was it, man, I'm hungry, I need to do better, even though you didn't know what the future was going to hold? So one is like looking back and fueling, one is looking forward and getting fuel. Where were you at that point?
Well, for me, it's about progress. Like, at the end of the day, when people are like, what's your why? It's about moving our people forward, even if it's a half a step, even if it's 2 steps. And if I can do that, then my cousins and my daughter that I had in my car seat had a chance, and that's what it is about. It's about progress, is that I've learned early on from several women that have mentored me that our parents only take us this far. It's our responsibility to take what they've given us and move the arrow. Like I was saying, you know, they shot their arrow, I heard, and it landed there. Now I'm picking it up and I'm shooting it. I'm only going to go so far with what I can do. So now my daughters, now it's going to be up to them, and I'm not pressuring them. They don't have to do that. But the inspiration for them to do that, because I'm living it and they're watching it as they're growing up, is like progress. I tell them, you know who you are, and your job is to show progress. So don't judge me by my past, judge me by the progress, right?
Yeah.
So that's the kind of mantra that I live every day. And I think that when someone sees it, just like me, when I met you, you recognize the energy of that, and people are like, how do I get that? How do I can surround myself around it, and how can you help me get to that feeling?
So you've obviously had grown up with a lot of energy. You're very vocal, and you're obviously a great communicator, a great leader. Sometimes that can be a bit intimidating to people. And tell me if this happened to you growing up. Did people ever say, you know what, you need to bring it down, like you're a little too loud, a little too energetic? Did that happen to you, or you just...
I didn't have the confidence that I have now.
Okay.
And that happened through, again, transitions, right, in my life. So I was in my first marriage that I was in, because I married my high school sweetheart. I'm not married to him now, but he's a good friend, who, again, he'll hurt people, was going through his own thing. So the infidelity, the physical abuse and mental abuse. So I felt very insecure. I was not that confident girl in high school. I was just the cool girl next door that got involved in all the activities. I played soccer, I did cheerleading, but I was not confident and knew who I was then. And so I didn't have all of this. This didn't happen to me until after I had gotten divorced. And I met someone I was in a relationship with someone early on that all he did was tell me, like, wow, you have a corporate job. Like, he was pouring into me in such a big way that I started to believe it. And it wasn't until that relationship that I learned that I deserved to be loved, that I deserved to be seen. And that person was the first person that I felt that saw me for beyond what I look like. It was more about who I was in my spirit, and he gave me that gift, you know.
So he saw those qualities in you, and obviously it was an outside voice, because your inside voice maybe wasn't seeing it, and obviously you weren't telling yourself. What does your inside voice tell you now? Like that, you wake up every day and you look in the mirror. What are you saying to yourself now?
Well, this is hard because people don't believe, you know, that. And I just had a conversation with my girl that I work out with, because I mentioned that I lost a son. I lost a son 7 years ago, and I went through postpartum depression. I even went through a depression where I didn't want to be here. And these are everyday thoughts that happen, and not because I want them to happen, right? You can be highly successful. We've seen stories on people that are committing suicide that are like highly successful, very ambitious movie stars or whatever. For me, it's like there's mornings that I wake up and I'm like, I don't want to be here doing this anymore. I want to just throw in the towel. Like, I don't want to be Hey Chica's face. I don't want to be the owner of this, because the work that has to be done, just like the pressure of making sure you're taking care of your family financially, emotionally. When you get to a place where influence, where people think you have influence, or for me, because I'm in the public eye, there's a large expectation that comes with that people feel like you owe them your time, your energy, your ear, your voice. And so if I'm carrying chicas in Dallas and a network of chicas, and these women are like, make time for me, can you help me, and then you overwhelmed with that, like, obviously the responsibility of that. And so for me, I have to really focus on my self-care. So I meditate, I journal, and I take care of my sacred peace and space. That way I can go and do these things, right? And I can hold space for that, because if I'm not pouring in, then I'm going to be pouring out. I'm not going to have enough. And so for me, it's a practice. I'm not this cheerful, positive, hey, all the time. You know, at home, I need my quiet time. I'm an introvert. I get my energy from quiet. Everyone sees me out, but I'm pouring out. You know, if you get extrovert, you get your energy from other people. I don't. I get it when I'm sitting in silence, you know, and I'm having a conversation, a glass of wine with my husband on the patio after the kids are asleep. And my thoughts are like, how do I grow this? How do I help people? How do I progress? How how do I put my people in the game? Like,
Yeah.
that's what I'm thinking about all the time.
You said introvertness, and so I also am an introvert, which explains obviously, like, when you are talking, it's outward, you're in control of the conversation. When I'm here, I'm prepped, I know the direction of the conversation. It's a trait. But what are some tricks that you have learned, because you've obviously overcome it, you manage your introvertness very well because of what you're doing? What are some tricks that you've taught yourself, and what some wisdom that you have for maybe an introvert? Because for some, that is what keeps them from growing or going where they need to go, is because they hide in it, and sometimes that's comfortable for them. But you're obviously coming out of that. You're open to be, not always being, you're a loud introvert, in other words. So what are some tips and tricks that you apply?
I think that we really need to know who we are, and that takes going back and dealing with stuff that's not pretty, right?
Yeah.
So for me, I had to go back again. I told you, the shootings, all these things. I think we need to know who we are, so then we're liberated. And then I can come in here in full confidence, like, I know who I am. So even if someone misinterprets what I say in my conversation, it doesn't matter. Like, even if you took a picture with me, I'm like, oh, that's not my right angle. I'm not that person, because I know who I am, and I'm accepting that this is who I am. And when you know that, and you know it 100%, then you're equanimous. Nothing moves you. You're grounded, and no one can push you over and steal your joy, because we know who we are. So I'm trying to teach that to my 7 and 9-year-old at home. Like, you know who you are, and if you don't, we're gonna figure that out. And when I used to work in corporate America, I had to play small. I had to represent a company, so my voice wasn't mine, it was theirs. And I had to watch what I said. I had to watch who I was with. And when I work for myself now, I feel so liberated. But also, as a business owner, I have a responsibility to cover mortgage and rent and finances and employees. And so it's a different animal to fight, right? But I'm liberated because I feel peace that I can speak my truth, because I know who I am.
So I believe in storytelling, like that. Like, the Felt podcast is one thing, but really the thing behind it that moves it is storytelling. I feel like what I want to pass down to my chica, which is my daughter, is like the power of her voice, the power of communicating. Because for me, with all the wrong decisions that I made growing up, and just day to day trying to make it happen, the one thing that I'm secure in is my story and communicating my story. It's allowed me to connect with so many people. It's opened so many doors. And so that's really what I push for people. I want them to be confident in sharing their story. You've shared a lot of your story today, but in order to do that, you have to be a great communicator. And so I just want to know, how do you see yourself as a communicator? What kind of things have you learned along the way? And, do you consider yourself a great communicator?
I do. I consider myself better than I was yesterday, right? I have to share this story because it's on the top of my mind now. When I first got my first job in Dallas, I worked for a hotel company, and I was that girl that was like, hi, like, I'm like Veronica, like talking in my little Chicana voice, right? And my boss was like pulling me to the side. She's like, you talk like you're from the ghetto. And I was like, and it was so, like, I was so insecure. Then I didn't talk, right? Because I knew that my vocabulary was not at that level. But maybe it was, and just maybe she noticed that. In the insecurity, I was just mortified. And I was like, oh my God, I need to. So I started reading the dictionary all the time. I started to try to find words that could express like a proper, conversation. And I was so insecure about it, like, for a long time. And then one of my colleagues gave me this book. It's called Fierce Conversations, and it changed my life. And I read it. I have it now on my nightstand, and I read it when I can, because I started to really go and investigate words and the power of that. And in there, there's a status that's it's a data point that says 90% of conversations are done and that people don't know. They're not even using the right words to express their real feelings. And it hit me, and I thought, I want to make sure that I have the word that truly articulates the emotion of what I'm trying to express in my conversation. And when I read that and I practiced that, game changer. And I've had a lot of my people critique me that I've asked, like, did I tell you exactly what that was and how it felt? And one of my friends was like, Veronica, you have a gift that you can really tell someone something and tell it in an exact way where they can feel it with emotion attached to it. And I never knew what that meant until I started teaching yoga and meditation and speaking on stages. And I thought, I do have a gift for that. And I didn't know that was a gift because I was so insecure about that before. But because I had spent 30 years studying words and how to really articulate my feelings, and it changed my life.
I love it. That's so beautiful because my wife, okay, she has this insecurity that when she talks, she feels like her Mexican accent comes out, and it kind of keeps her from in a meeting setting or in a group setting to be more vocal, and she can't overcome that. Have you heard of that with any of the chicas that you've dealt with? And what do you tell them to kind of overcome that? And it may exist and it may not, but that's not the point. You know what I mean?
Right. It does exist. It's an insecurity from a lot of my friends. I have friends from Ecuador and Nicaragua, and they're on stages now, and they just embrace that. And I think that a lot of people have like a crush on Latinos, right? In a way like pop culture does, or like culture does on the hip hop culture, right? It's like the thing. And I think that it's not the accent. I think it's the insecurity of using the right word to express themselves.
Yeah.
So a lot of people, I remember early on when I was single, and people were like, oh, guys I would date that were not Spanish speaking were like, oh, say something in Spanish, girl. You know, it was always like alluring, like the Latina. If you Google Latina now, it gives you like this sex kitten and blah, 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 blah. And these things that are kind of misinterpreted. But I think that embracing just whatever that is, you know, your insecurity or what it is, there's so much power in that. And you can tell people that all day, but until they practice it, just like I practice going to the dictionary and going to a word. So if they really want it more than they're afraid of it, that's where the power is.
If you can send a message to your younger self, or even younger Latinas right now, what would those words of wisdom be, or what motivation would you give them? Let's just say high school Latina right now. What words of inspiration would you give them? And I know you got a lot to pick from, but what's something that you wish that you could have told yourself?
Well, it's funny you say that. I'm speaking to about 300 chicas in 2 weeks, and I'm going to tell them the rites of passage, going through the timeline. My message is, you got to know who you are. And I say that every time now because it makes you, immediately when I said that to you, you probably go back to your thought like, damn, do I know who I am? You know what I mean? It starts to ask you, where you're like, let me think about, am I that person? And I tell these young girls, like, right now they have such a hard time filtering through the influencer world, the social media world, even at home. Like, we have to get them to understand that that's not real life. That's an illusion. What you tell yourself is what's real, because your energy follows thought. So if you're telling yourself you're ugly, you're not smart, you don't fit in, then you're going to make it a belief. And the belief is going to stay there, and it's going to make reality. So when you know that power is like, let's start to tell ourselves the beliefs, feel the emotion of what that is, and then let it unfold into our greatness of what that is. And I can break it down for you, and it just starts of how you wake up in the morning, the first thought you have and the last thought you have at night. Like, let's make that the best thought that actually discovers who you are, even if it's a sad day or a happy day. Like, I'm human, and that's what it's for. And I also tell them, use the trick where you tell your brain, right? Because we're primal. Our brain is conditioned to protect us. So that's the fight or flight. Your brain is conditioned to keep you away from harm. And so it'll tell you anything to protect your physical well-being. So tell your brain, thank you for for looking out for me. I got this now. And then you make the decision. You have the intuition to either decide if you want a grievance or a miracle.
Yeah, I think of this meme where there's two deer, and one deer just runs through the fence, and he hurts himself trying to squeeze in, but he's going full speed. His flight and fight are fully activated. And then there's another deer that kind of stops and takes a few steps to the left, and it's wide open. You know what I mean? Like, it seems so close because you're in that mood, and then sometimes it's just a small shift that can help you. And so in your journey, obviously you're speaking to chicas, you're influencing a lot of people, but what women can you recall? I know you mentioned your mom and your grandma, but aside from that, who have influenced you that you look up to and admire, that have poured into you? Because you're obviously that Latina, you're that chica now for so many, that in the future people are going to be referencing you when they say what motivated you. And so I'm asking you, who are some women, whether it be a book or it could be anyone, that have inspired you?
Right now it's my tias that are still living that I can go back and that, made me know, like, I still have this tia that's 92 that shows up, with her makeup done and her hair curled and always knew that when she walked into a room, she had to own it, right? And my tias were like corporate women before I knew what that was. They were working, they were the manager at Academy Sports Store. And this is back in the 70s and 80s. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, unheard of Latinas that are in there, and their stories, I'm like, wow, I do come from a good cloth, Oh,
yeah.
And they inspire me now because I talk to them and the way that they love and their faith, and I'm like, wow, that's amazing. And so it doesn't take a college education to do life well. Like, you can still do that in such a grand way, because at the end of the day, an education and knowledge is the same thing. Like, reading, knowledge of knowing what not to do and right and wrong, and culture and respect, that's knowledge too. And I have women like that have poured into me, and these are many women in Fort Worth and in Dallas that call me and say, Vero, how can I help you? Vero, what can I do for you? Let me lend myself to see your alignment happen. And I was talking to my friends last night. I'm going to talk about this is important. We had a Hey Chica meeting, and we were sitting around this fire pit, and we're like, who is our Latina in America? Who is our lady that's like, I have my best friend's black, and she's like so inspired by like Michelle Obama, like the girl Issa Lorraine, who's all these movie stars, Tyler Perry, and that are like in there, and they're like, Michelle Obama is like, wow, like doing the thing, and they're like, is it J-Lo? I'm like, no, that's not my person. Yeah. And is it America Ferreras, or is it AOC? And I'm like, Evelyn Gore. I'm like, no, those are not my people that I'm like chasing and liking and following. And they, and the black, my black sisters have Beyonce, these women that are like, and I'm not saying that J-Lo's not, or for me, I'm like, is it Gloria Estefan? Like, who's waking me up in the morning where I want to go check her out and get behind her and do that, And it was hard for us. And then we're like, in Dallas, who's that person? Who's the person in Fort Worth? And I think that we're like, why can't we just name, like I was naming off Michelle Obama and all these women. How come I can't name that for Latinas? And we were trying to really dig deep because we want to share that message. And it was because my perception is that when you start climbing that ladder like that, the weight of the world is on you, and we're not resilient enough to power through that, because we're still struggling with our identity as Latinos. We're still struggling. Are we going to lean to the white side, or are we going to lean to the culture and lean with our black side and the struggle and the hustle and the fight? And we've always been trained, put your head down, get out the way, work hard, stay out of the business. You know what I mean? And it's so embedded in us that now for us to go in there and be Cesar Chavez and say, I'm going to go, against the grain, and I'm going to fight for the people. Yeah. we're not there yet and that's just my perception of what I see in Dallas.
No,
and I don't
you.
know, this is my lens, but I'm like, how do we build Latinas to be my 7 and 8, 9-year-old Latina to say, man, like they're forging through and they're busting doors open and they're respecting the game and they're doing business with other Latinas and they're respecting so I'm learning a lot about who these people are and issues that we can come together and, walk the walk.
I think of like Maria Hinojosa as a broadcaster and the impact she's making for people who maybe want to get in communication. But I get that I can't come up with something. John Leguizamo came out with a Netflix special.
I love that, Netflix.
I like what he's doing. I like how he taught history. Mm-hmm. And I think our time as Latinos is here. Like, we're in it right now, and we're, taking over. We're taking over cities, organizations. We're taking over, top positions left and right. I see it more and more. For instance, at this year's Christmas parade, there was so much Latino representation in the parade. And I told my wife, I said, just notice the names. That company, Latino owned. That company, Latino owned. And so it's happening now. And yes, I would love, if I asked my daughter, who, for her to have an answer. And I don't think she has an answer right now.
Yeah.
And maybe we, as a community, we can fix that.
Here's the thing too, is like, we have now transitioned to the largest demographic in Texas, Latinos, right? So we're the numbers, but are we putting the force and the power behind that? And it's a cultural thing. It's really still, because we're still like figuring out our lineage and where that comfort goes, and the fear of putting ourselves out there and having the house crumble or whatever that is. Yeah. I'm excited that we have an opportunity now, but when you know better, you do better, right? Like, so how can I start to pour into this next gen and get them to be, and I'm not saying I put the expectation someone needs to be the queen in shining armor that comes and saves the world. Yeah. I'm not saying that. I'm saying, let us know and start to find out who we are, so the power and the liberation of speaking our truth and the work that really belongs to us to do shows up for the rest of the culture.
I love it. The Chica Movement. Can you share a crucial early decision that helped shape Chica and what it is now and where it's going? Like, what got into you to say, I'm going to start it and here's my big dream for it? Like, I love that it exists, but sometimes just to make it happen is so hard. Yeah. What stuck out? What really made you wake up the next day and say, I'm doing it. I'm starting this organization?
Well, Hey Chica came when I lost my son. I went back to work, and I was working in a corporate office, and I noticed that everyone was just kind of, in my own lens, was like doing the same thing. I got to make the donuts. You know what I mean? It was like there was I wanted everyone to see me and say, oh my God, this happened to you. There was a something that changed the world. It's like the whole world is on fire now. There's a new earth and life, right? So I was like, I was traumatized and said, this happened to me, and I'm coming back to work. And if I sit in this cube and do nothing about it, if it goes to waste, then I feel like that whole experience of being in the hospital room and all this happening totally unexpectedly, like it would go to waste. Yeah. And so I started writing down, I'm like, and there's nobody in the office that really looks like me. I started to see things that I didn't notice in such an intense way before. And so I thought, you know what? I'm going to bring my chicas together. I'm going to bring all my sisters together. I'm going to create a summit with my friends. I thought it was like 100 people or 50 people that I knew. I already had been doing Latino networkers. Like, I had started one called Social Latino. So I was already doing that on the side, like just bringing all my compas together. Yeah. And so I thought, I want something special for Latinas. And I was invited to all these parties, Super Bowl parties and all this, and no one looked like me. And I thought, it's not fair now that I'm experiencing this and I don't have my people with me. It's like I saw Kevin Hart post, like, it's not fair when you have all the money and your friends don't because they can't play with you. And so I started to write down, like, okay, I'm gonna do a one-day thing. I'm gonna talk about side hustles. I'm gonna talk about being a chica, da 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 da. And the name Hey Chica was not just for Latinos. Everyone's a chica. I was telling everyone, when you go to Spain, they're going to call you a chica if you're a white girl, black girl, whatever. You're just a girl, right? So it wasn't like it was only for Latinas. It was my Jay-Z version of, hey, girl, let me put you in the game. So Hey Chica came from that same intention. And so I wrote it out, and it became something way bigger. 300 women showed up. We did it at SMU in Dallas. And then I was like, okay, it's just a one-time thing. Well, then little did I know it was like a snowball going on, and I got a lot of women involved because I didn't want to do it myself. And then we lost some women that we have to transition through relationship breakups and stuff. And then COVID happened.
Man, yeah.
And then people were like, we need this in high schools and junior high. So we started doing it in high school and junior high. So the great thing about it is that I didn't ever put an expectation of what it was going to be. I just let it boil and do its thing. And I'll use the same Michael Jackson reference. He said, I never thought that Beat It or Thriller were going to be what they were. I just meditated, went in my room, got in my creative space. It's like you're a creative. You think you're going to go in there and do something, and then, man, the universe and God blesses you and shows you something else because you're so in the flow of what it is. And Hey Chica's not even where it is now, is not even where I know it's going to go. And I'm just falling in line, and I'm allowing these relationships to happen organically without controlling it.
So having my daughter and her dynamic with her friends, and you're my friend, you're not my friend, and then I look at like my wife's friends and our circles, and I'm fighting, I'm better, you're not this, you're not that, and there's just this not coming together that I don't like. I believe in community, I believe in togetherness, and you use the word sisterhood in some of your talks and interviews, and I just wanted to see what your perspective is on the word sisterhood and encouraging words for, chicas to get along, because together we're just stronger. We can move further.
Absolutely, and I'm going to change the word too, because I got into this new group of women called the Summit in Dallas, and these are women of all races and all. They're like business women who want to help put women on boards and in opportunity. And I was there, and there was this amazing prominent white lady from Dallas, is very successful, and she's like, we're not a sisterhood, that's a sorority. We are a put people in the game hood, right? Like we are beyond that at the point. And I thought, you know what, that's, again, I was listening, right? I was obedient. I was like, oh, so it is a sisterhood, but at the same time, I said, you know what, we're going to be the No Mean Girl movement. So the No Mean Girl movement we have adopted, and it's don't be mean to your future, that's leadership. Don't be mean to yourself, that's self-care. Don't be mean to your community, that's advocacy, right?
That's great.
So now I can go to my young 7-year-old and be like, are you going to be a part of the Mean Girl movement or not Mean Girl movement? So you can really take that and dumb it down and express that to a 7-year-old and say, are we going to be mean to that today? Are you going to be mean to yourself and tell yourself you can't do it? So you give it to them, again, going back to fierce conversations, when you have the right word that articulates what we're actually doing, then that's where the explosion of understanding comes from, right? I can say sisterhood, and I still will reference that because a lot of people only identify when they know what that means, hermanahood or whatever. But now that I'm doing something outside in Hey Chica, Made Latino, which is for our men, so I can't use sisterhood there. So I use Made Latino because using the Italian
So you have the Hey Latino too now?
Made Latino.
Made Latino.
It's our men part, and it's because I use the same thing, reference as an Italian made man. Everyone knows Godfather, everyone knows Scarface. When you're made, you're protected by the people, you're protected by the game, you're protected by business. So everyone's like, oh, is it made by Latinos? Hecho en Mexico? I was like, no, this is saying I'm a made man because I'm going to stand up for my sister. I'm going to put my sister in the game. Yeah. So now I'm going to my hermanos and saying, hey, bro, you have a podcast. Are you putting Latinas in it? Or hey, I have a business. Are you reaching out to a sister and put? Because again, I
don't want to get in trouble, so you have to help me get some more Latinas on here. Okay. Anyways, continue.
No, but you know what I'm saying? I'm saying, and I.
But I hear you.
So now we host these every other month dinners that call Made Latino, and so the sisterhood is now turning into the togetherhood. It's like bringing my brothers in and saying, you do this, where's the room to bring the progress, right? Yeah. And so I even like, man, that's a made move. because everyone knows the Italian made reference. So
Absolutely.
I'm using that same reference to articulate we're about something else. It's not like, oh, I'm celebrating girls and I'm just focused on small business owners, so I'm gonna help her, put an Instagram up, and I'm like, that's great, but moving action and long-term strategy and progress is helping me. To help me is to go to my yoga studio and pay for a class, not just, you know what I mean? Like, help me in that way. That's the weight that I'm saying. And now I'm going like, I want to find my made Latino brothers that are like, I'm willing to bring my girls up too and support the real movement. So sisterhood, yes. No mean girl, yes. But women have to know that they don't take away from themselves if they give to someone else.
I love that. No mean girl. I like it. And my daughter, you're watching.
Yeah, take it.
Receive
I'm going
it,
to come and
girl.
drop off some swag because we have the shirt. We're going to be the shirts and the campaign launches at our event. And I do want to mention that the reason why we used to do our event in Hispanic Heritage Month. And I said, no, you know what? No more, because
Do it. Yeah.
why? But also March is International Women's Month. So why not celebrate international women on that month and maximize what that really means and give whoever's celebrating International Women's Month the international part of the celebration.
Here at the Failed Podcast, we talk about failure, what we learned from it, and how we overcame it. When you think of the word failure, how do you define it, and what advice would you give to someone dealing with failure?
Failure for me is progress. So I defined it as progress because it's changing everything that you believed in and thought that should have happened to become what it is from a learning experience. I try to fail all the time. And my husband uses that, like, just get punched in the face, Veronica. All you need is that first punch so you can feel it and know what that feels like. And then you can get your stance. And then you can get ready for, still can't anticipate what is to come, but at least that you can get your mind, body, and spirit and get your stance in place. So failure for me, you can look at my entire life and say she failed at all of that, right? I was experiencing layoffs, death, loss. I mean, failure is like, that's easy to do.
Yeah.
That's easy work. You know what I mean? It's like, how do you like, the hard work is after that and taking the punch.
I'm going to put all your socials in a way for people to get a hold of you, including the summit that's coming up March 2nd. But is there anything that you want to plug before I put a bow on this episode?
I love this conversation. Thank you.
It's been great. Trust me. Like, you gave me some things. I'm just gonna go home and say, look, Chica.
Yes. And I want to invite you to Made Latino. I really want to talk about. We're bringing Hey Chica to Fort Worth for a luncheon on March 8th. So it's coming to Fort Worth. I'm taking the women who've been involved in it to talk about the New Comadre framework. So it's going to be our way of what we think is working on how we work together. And it's breaking the silos of how women, I have a women's empowerment. I do too. And don't go to this and don't do this. We're trying to come in and say, there's a new comadre framework, right?
I love it.
And so, and I say comadre and not chica because a comadre it takes it to another level.
Yeah. Obviously, when I hear that word, I know what it means, but I love it.
So I'm intentional, right, with what we say and do. So we're doing that on March 8th. So that actually is going to go up tomorrow, the invite, and that's going to happen.
I'll share it on socials and
I'll
stuff
send you
like
the
that.
invite so you can share that because we really want to engage with women in Fort Worth. And that's going to be huge. And then Made Latino in Fort Worth. That's a dinner, like I said, bringing our brothers and our sisters together. And then my husband and I do a lot of events here around boxing and MMA fighting promotion. We do Tuesday night fights, and I invite my people to come out and see that. It's fun, it's entertaining, it's exposing small business, it's teaching us to bring culture to commitment and passion. Like, I think the MMA boxing, all that's a culture in itself. People like that. And I like it because it's entertaining, but at the same time, we've got to stand strong and know who we are from that perspective too, right? Feel safe and do a lot of fun stuff like that. But health and wellness is my core jam, right? I own a yoga studio. I'm opening another gym in Dallas. And so for me, it's like teaching self-care, teaching fitness, teaching our people to be resilient by our physical and mental health. So I invite you to get involved in your own self-care movement with that. And I love that I'm going to be a vessel to help communicate that. But Hey Chica, we have a lot of calendar things going on. So get plugged in. Our self-care summits in July, our advocacy summer. This is a big election year. Latinos got to get out and vote.
Yes.
So that's going to happen in October. Other than that, just tag me. Let me know what you're doing. I want even our listeners and who's listening, like tag me and put me in your game. And
Absolutely.
How can I support you and show up and amplify the things that you're doing? And then also, I want to invite you to do business with me.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
So I believe in the giving flowers, not when you're dead, but when you're alive. And so I want to give you some flowers from observing you and kind of studying you. I just wanted to say, good job. Your voice has power. People, chicas, but people are following you to find inspiration and motivation. And you've been given a gift that gets opened over and over and over through the relationships that you establish. So, I'm thankful when we have amazing people in this world, but it's more of a blessing whenever I get to sit down and have a conversation with those amazing people. So keep going. And also, I've created a token for the failed podcast. And so after failure, our mind shifts and then we become doers. And when you do, I have this, if you look up there on the screen, you see that check mark behind you?
Yeah.
So I have this thing that I'm establishing, and that is check the box. So after you fail, start checking boxes. I want to do this. I want to do that. I want to do this. And that's how you progress in life. And so obviously with your story and what you've gone through, you check the box on that you didn't quit. That's what you check the box on. And so on my token, it says the Failed Podcast on that side. And on the back, it says don't quit. And you check the box.
Oh, I love it.
And this is for you.
Thank you.
And just want to say thank you for coming on the Failed Podcast. And it was a great conversation. Thank you so much. And everyone watching, I hope you enjoyed this conversation. All the socials and links will be in the description below. Thank y'all so much for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.